Hi everyone, here's some practice Punnett square questions that I'm going to work out for you step by step so you can have more practice at home. The first question we're going to do, I'm calling it a normal Mendelian trait. These are the first ones we learned. This is where you have one dominant allele, one recessive allele, and then just one gene that codes for a trait. Let's go ahead and read this question. It says Louise has freckles, which is a dominant trait. Her father, however, did not have freckles. Louise's husband, Ralph, does not have freckles either. If Louise and Ralph have kids, what are the chances that they will have children with freckles? Okay, so here, I always find that it's helpful to underline the important information. It tells you in the first sentence that freckles is the dominant trait, and we'll need to keep track of that. And the question has to tell you what the dominant allele is, otherwise you would just be guessing. So freckles is the dominant allele. Now we can start writing down the chart that we did in class. So I always suggest make a chart, put phenotypes on one side, put genotypes on the other side. For this question, there's two phenotypes. Remember, phenotypes are what you can see with your eye. It's the observable trait, so you can see freckles. That's one option. Or you can have no freckles. That's the other phenotype. And then again, in this question, they tell you freckles is dominant. I'm going to just put a dot by freckles so I can remember that that's the dominant trait. Once you hear the word dominant, you should automatically think uppercase big letters. That codes for the dominant trait. So to have freckles, you could have gotten two big Fs, one from each parent. That'll definitely give you freckles. Or you could have gotten one big F and one little f. That's the heterozygote. Remember, the dominant allele, the capital letter, it works kind of like a trump card. Once you have one of those, it covers up any other letter that's next to it. So someone who's big F looks exactly the same as someone who's big F little f. Both of those people would have freckles. That one big F is enough to guarantee that you have freckles. If you do not have freckles, you have to have two little f's. That's the recessive phenotype. Okay, so there's our chart. Now let's go ahead and figure out the characters in our story. So we have Louise. I'll put her right here. It says Louise has freckles. Okay, I'll go ahead and write down both possibilities. She could be big F, or she could be big F little f. Just from that one statement, we don't know what she is. But they give you information about her father. Anytime they bring in a father of a character, that's normally to help you cross out one of two possibilities. Here they tell you her father did not have freckles. He didn't have freckles, which means he had two little f's, right? That's the only way to not have freckles. And as a dad, he has to give one of those little f's to his daughter, so we know that she cannot be big F, but she has to be big F little f, and that little f came from her dad. Okay, so there's Louise. Ralph is a little bit easier because it tells you he doesn't have freckles. And looking at our chart, we know if you have no freckles, then you have to be little f. That's the only option there. Okay, we go ahead and do a Punnett square. We'll put Louise on top and just separate her letters from each other. So there's a big F, there's a little f. Ralph can go on the side. Again, it doesn't matter where you put either parent, it'll come out the same, but I just went ahead and did it that way. And you bring the letters together in the box to make the kids. This was just like in class when we were doing that little activity with the two pieces of paper and you and your partner were throwing down pieces of paper to make kids. Here you're doing the same thing in a Punnett square. Okay, so these are the combinations for the kids. Now we got to go back to the question as it is asked. Okay, be very careful about that. So the question as it is asked, it says, what are the chances that the children will have freckles? So we want to know which of the kids will have freckles. Oh my, what happened to my letters? There they are. Okay, what are the chances that the kids will have freckles? So if we look at this square, kids with freckles have a big F. Here we have a kid in this square with a big F, and then here we have a kid with a big F. So both of these kids will have freckles. It's 2 out of 4 boxes, so that's a 50% chance that they will have kids with freckles. And that's how you do this problem. Again, a normal Mendelian trait. All right. The next type of problem is called incomplete dominance. Here you got to remember the definition of incomplete dominance. That's when the dominant allele cannot completely cover up the recessive allele. And so if you have a dominant allele next to a recessive allele, a heterozygote, that individual will show a blended look. They will look in between the two extremes, and that's what you see with incomplete dominance. Let's read this question. It says sickle cell anemia is a recessive disease that shows incomplete dominance. Okay, so that's really important. It's a recessive disease that shows incomplete dominance. The homozygous dominant genotype codes for normal-shaped red blood cells, while the homozygous recessive genotype codes for all sickle-shaped red blood cells. Louise has sickle cell anemia, while Ralph is homozygous dominant. What would be the genotype and phenotype of their kids? All right. This trait, you guys actually did a problem like this in lab, so it might sound kind of familiar. But let's go ahead and try to code for this. Here, we'll make a chart again, phenotype and genotype. For diseases, remember, for the phenotype, you don't write down everything you see with your eye. You just write down if the person has the disease or doesn't have the disease. This one will be a little bit more complicated than that, but that's generally the idea. So for the phenotypes, you can have sickle cell. That's one option. Or you cannot have sickle cell, no sickle cell. And I'm purposely leaving a blank in the middle for a reason. But those are our two general phenotypes. How do we code for them? So sickle cell anemia, they tell you it's a recessive disease. Recessive, think lowercase small letters. So if you have sickle cell anemia, we'll use the letter A for anemia. Then you have to have 2 copies of the recessive allele. Okay, 2 copies of the recessive allele. If you do not have sickle cell anemia, you have to have a big A, right? It's dominant to not have the disease, and we'll go ahead and code it with 2 big A's. Here, now we got to consider the heterozygote. Normally, the heterozygote looks exactly the same as the homozygous dominant, but because this is an incomplete dominant problem, it actually will look different. It'll have an in-between look, and that's why I left a space in between. So someone with a big A, little a will look in between someone who has the other 2 extremes. In this case, this person will have half of their red blood cells look sickle-shaped and the other half not. So for the phenotype, I'll just write half sickle cell or half sickle to abbreviate it. Okay, so again, it's incomplete dominant. The big A does not completely cover up the little a, and so you will have an intermediate look here. Let's go to the problem. So here it says Louise has sickle cell anemia. So Louise has the disease full out. So we know that she has to be little a, little a. And then they tell you Ralph is homozygous dominant. They make that very clear for you. So as long as you know the vocabulary, you know that he is big A, big A. And they want to know what the kids look like. And specifically, they want to know, if you read the last sentence, they want to know the genotype and the phenotype of their kids. Let's go ahead and make this box here. Louise, we'll put her up here. So you split apart her 2 little A's. Ralph will go on the side. His 2 big A's. You'll bring them together to make the kids. And you'll notice pretty quickly that all the kids look exactly the same. They're all big A, little a. So when the question asks what is their genotype, 100% their genotype, that means the coding, they're all big A, little a. Okay. For the phenotype, if we look at our chart, big A, little a, it codes for this half look. Let me pull out another piece of paper. Again, for their genotype, all the kids are 100% big A, little a. They're that heterozygote. For their phenotype, they are 100% this in-between look. So we'll call it half sickle cell, half normal. And here, you really wouldn't know what this looks like unless you take a blood sample of this person. If you did take a blood sample of this person, you would notice is half of their red blood cells would be normal shaped, kind of this donut shaped, and then the other half of them would be this crinkle wrinkle shape. Okay, so they really are showing in between the 2 extremes. They have the normal ones, but they also have the sickle cell. And that's what we see. It's incomplete dominant. So the big A doesn't take over. You see both types of red blood cells. And that's what you would see with Ralph and Louise's kids in this problem. And this, again, is an incomplete dominant problem, an exception. Okay, the next type of problem is called codominance. For codominance, there's really only one example that we ever do, and that's blood type. It's a really good example. Here, let's go ahead and read the question. It says Louise is blood type AB, Ralph is blood type B, Ralph's dad, however, was blood type O. What are the potential blood types of Louise and Ralph's kids? Okay, so just like before, we're going to go ahead and make a chart. Here you have to memorize the blood types, and you have to memorize how to code for them, but otherwise, the question is not that hard to do. So for the blood types, the phenotype, you obviously can't see blood. Here you just report the different blood types. So you can be A, you can be B, you can be AB, or you can be blood type O. Those are the 4 blood types. Codominance, that means you have 2 dominant alleles, 2 strong alleles. And in this case, both A and B are dominant. O is recessive to both of them. So when we code for the genotype, it looks something like this. Blood type A, it's dominant. That means you could have gotten 2 big A's, 1 from each parent, or you could have gotten an A from one parent and an O from the other parent. The O is recessive, it gets hidden. Same thing for blood type B, you could have gotten 2 big B's, or you could have gotten a big B and an O. For blood type AB, you had to have gotten an A from one parent, a B from another parent, and that's the codominance. That person shows both types of blood antigens on their red blood cell surface. If you're blood type O, you have to have 2 O's because O is recessive, like that. Okay, so those you do have to memorize. Let's go to the characters. It says Louise is blood type AB. So that's easy because there's only one way to code for AB, and that's to have an A and to have a B. Ralph is blood type B. There's 2 ways to get that. He could be big B, or he could be big B, O. They tell you about his dad, and the dad kind of helps you figure out which of these 2 he is. It says Ralph's dad, however, was blood type O, so that means the dad only has O alleles to give. Ralph has to have gotten one of those, so he can't be big B, he has to be big B, O. Okay, now we can cross these together to see about their kids. So just to mix things up, I'll put Ralph on top this time, so separate his B from his O allele. Louise will be on the side, it'll come out the same way. A there and a B there. And just bring them together in the squares. Do it in alphabetical order. It's easier to read. And then there's the kids right there. So now go back to the question. The question says, what are the potential blood types of Louise and Ralph's kids? So we have a few different blood types here. This kid right here is blood type AB. Then we have the kid right next to that kid, this one right here. If you have an A and an O, that kid is blood type A. And then the 2 on the bottom, although they're coded differently, you have a big B, and a big B, O. Both of these kids are blood type B. Okay, so when the question asks what are the potential blood types, they don't actually want to know these codes right here. They don't want to know the alleles. They want to know the blood type, just the plain old letter. So if we remember this and record it, what we would actually say, we have 25% of the kids are AB, like mom. 25% of the kids are blood type A, and then another 50% were blood type B, the 2 on the bottom. Okay, and that's how you report the potential blood types of the kids. And this again was a codominant trait. The A and the B share dominance, and that's why you have that blood type AB right there. Okay. Okay, last type of problem, sex-linked trait. So here it says baldness is a recessive sex-linked trait. Ralph is bald and Louise is homozygous dominant for this trait. What are the chances of them having bald sons, bald daughters? Okay, when it says sex-linked trait, it means that the trait is carried on one of the sex chromosomes. And in this case, it's always the X chromosome for our problems. So remember, the sex chromosomes are your X's and Y's at the very, very end of your 23 pairs is the 23rd pair. So when you do these problems, you got to keep track of not only the trait, baldness in this case, but also the sex of the character. So it's a little bit more complicated. But we'll go ahead and make that same chart that we always do, phenotype and genotype. And again, let's go ahead and write down all the possibilities and then we'll get to the story. So for phenotype, we have, got to keep track of females and males. Let's do the females first. The two choices for females are you could be a bald female or you can be not bald female. Same thing, for males, you could be a bald male or you can be a not bald male. Okay, we got to go back to the problem. It says baldness is a recessive sex-linked trait. Okay, again, recessive, think lowercase letters. So let's do the females. For the bald female, you got to remember that females are XX, so go ahead and do that. She is bald, which is the recessive trait. Let's use the letter B for baldness. For her to be bald, she has to have two little b's that are literally on her X chromosomes, and you'd write it like that. That's for you. That's how you would have a bald female. For a not bald female, she's still XX, but not bald. That's actually the dominant look. So she could be X big B, or she could be X big B, X little b. Those would both be not bald females. For bald males, you got to remember that males are XY. To be bald, he would be X little by. To be not bald, he's still XY, but he would be X big BY. And it's important you don't put any little letters on the Y chromosome. If you guys remember that picture I showed you, the Y chromosome is tiny compared to the X. It doesn't hold information for these traits, so it's literally blank. Don't put a letter, it'll mess up your problem. Okay, so there we have it. Now let's go to the question. It says Ralph is bald. All right, there's only one option there. He's a man and he's bald, so oops, that wasn't the right option. Haha. Let's do that again. So he's a man and he is bald, so he has to be this one right here. And then it tells you that Louise is homozygous dominant for this trait. So they go ahead and spell it out for you. Homozygous dominant, she's that one right there. X big B, X big B. Now let's go ahead and cross them. I'm gonna flip to another page just to give me more room. But remember this question. It says, what are the chances of them having bald sons and bald daughters? Okay, so remember that. Remember their genotypes, and then let's go ahead and flip the sheet is what I meant to say. So let's go ahead and write down the cross right here. And then I'll go ahead and put Louise on the top. Remember, she was X big B, X big B. And then just like those other problems, just separate her two sex chromosomes. Make sure you keep the capital B where it needs to go, but they each get their own column heading like that. Ralph will go on the side. He's X little b, Y. And then you just bring the letters together. If there's an X, put it first. If there's a capital letter on one of the X's, put it first. It just makes it easier to read. And there you go. Remember, the question had asked, what are the chances of them having bald sons and also the chances of them having bald daughters? Let's look at the sons first. The sons, remember, they have to be XY. So it's these two boxes down here. Are either of them bald? Baldness was recessive. So recessive, think lowercase letters. These two boys do not have lowercase b, so they both are not bald. So you have 0% chance of having bald sons. The sons will not look like their daddy for this trait. How about the daughters? Are any of the daughters bald? The daughters are on the top two squares. Remember, daughters are XX, and let's go ahead and look at them. Here, if you want a female who's bald, they have to have two copies of the little b. Neither of these girls do. They both have an X with a big B. The big B trumps, so they are not bald. So you have 0% chance of bald daughters too. All right, and that's how you do this problem right here. So this was a sex-linked problem. Remember, if it says sex-linked, you have to put X's and Y's to keep track of the character's sexes. If it doesn't say sex-linked, don't worry about that. A lot of times after I teach these problems, students want to make everything sex-linked. Very few traits are actually sex-linked, so do not do it unless the problem says it's sex-linked. All right, so hopefully this was all helpful. There's basically just a few types of problems: your normal Mendelian genetics, then there's incomplete dominance, codominance, sex-linked traits. Those are the 4 types of problems that you might expect on a lab practical or a test. Hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to watch it over and over again if it doesn't drive you crazy, and definitely practice. All right, thank you. Take care.